right, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to our pre-chat before the forum. I see there's only 2 people right now, so that would include me. So one person could be watching, and that's okay. We'll wait for other people to join us. But I'm looking forward to this forum today, and we're excited. So I will wait for more people to join.
They're all, it seems like those are going up. I know you have one now. Some of my executives, so Sarah, I know you're on. Yeah. Why does she sell?
We are excited for today's forum today. We have a great panelists today. Elizabeth Brown from Columbus City Council, Christie Angel from YWCA, and Lisa Patt-McDaniel from the Workforce Development Board of Central Ohio. So we are excited. And it's hosted by Joe Ingles from State House News Bureau. So welcome everyone, good morning. Thanks for joining us for our pre-chat. If you're we're looking forward to our forum, like I said, and if you are experiencing any kind of impact with COVID and you're a woman, feel free to put that in the chat, or if you know anyone who's experienced anything with COVID, feel free to put that in the chat. But thanks for joining us, and I'll wait for a few more people to join us, and we can just talk a little bit about what the subject will be today. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat as well, and I can get them over to Jane so she'll be able to ask. Looking forward to today's presentation as well. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. You'll see our panelists are there, getting ready. Andy is getting them ready. Hi, Carol. Good morning. As you can see, everyone, I am by myself today. Lainey is on vacation. She took St. Patty's Day off, so she is on vacation today. And happy St. Patty's Day, everyone. I am not wearing green today. I totally forgot, but it's okay. Oh, I have green in my mask, so that's fine.
I want to have a conversation more like, so she can like hear each other. If you see something, just do that. All right, it's not like, oh, you did a turn and you did a turn. It's not like they.
I'm doing the sound today, so I'll be bringing
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning for our pre-chat. Still, some people are slowly coming into the pre-chat. If you know anyone who's been impacted by COVID in any way, feel free to put that in the chat as far as anything that's related to our topic today.
Where are we? Where are we going? What's the future look like? All of these are new format. So time-wise, this is mostly for you. Well, 35 is the heads up to audience questions.
We have 10 more minutes until the program begins. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat ahead of time, so I can get them over to Jane, or as quickly as you can, so I can get them over to Jane. Thanks for joining.
One last question, or maybe 2 more quickly. One more quickly. We can go a little bit long, but we can't go a little short. And as your cue, just turn it back.
10 more minutes. We'll be hearing from our awesome panelists. They are Elizabeth Brown from Columbus City Council, Christie Angel from YWCA, and Lisa Patt-McDaniel from Workforce Development Board of Central Ohio, and it's hosted by Joe Ingalls from State House News Bureau. We're excited, and thank you for the question, Carol. I will get that over to Jane.
I like that. So you want us to put it on and or just take it off?
Take it off the first line.
Okay, all right. I always try to leave on my so they can see what they're doing when they come on camera, and then I take it off. Yeah, but then that way, like, it just shows that they're practicing it.
Okay, few more people are joining. Good morning. Thanks for joining us this morning. Looking forward to today's topic. Feel free to chat in the, feel free to type in the chat. Talk about any experiences you have or anyone you know who's had different experiences pertaining to COVID.
We'll see if I can get around here. I haven't taken my earrings.
Catch it on there and pull your.
Right.
Yeah, important topic.
You see the panelists are getting ready. Andy is getting them ready. So we're excited. 8 more minutes until we begin. And for those who are just now joining, I am by myself today. My counterpart is on vacation. She took St. Patrick's Day off, so good. That's good for her. Happy St. Patty's Day, everyone. Oh, I see more people are joining. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to our pre-chat.
All right, cool. So stand by. We've got about 10 minutes.
Rick's here too.
7 minutes.
7 minutes? Oh my. Where's the time?
You want to put it over?
Looking forward to today's chat, everyone. Welcome, everyone who's joining.
I could just look on my phone, but you know that's too hard.
Looking forward to today as well, Kate. Thanks for joining us.
How about you?
Thanks for joining us today.
Fairfield County.
I have 2 of them.
Good morning, everyone.
They go too fast.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat and I can get them along to Jane. Welcome to our pre-chat. We'll be starting our forum in 7 minutes and we are looking forward to today's forum. It definitely will be interesting to hear. And also happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone. I don't have any green on today because I totally forgot, but I do have green on my mask, so I guess that counts. But yeah, looking forward. Hi, Seema. How are you? Good to see everyone. Good to see people popping up. Thanks for joining us again.
I'm not going to be in this room. Just get the fire.
Looking forward to today's panel with our excellent panelists to talk about this important discussion.
You okay with mask off, guys? For the picture? Just for the picture?
Alright. I see people slowly coming in. Thanks for joining, everyone. Feel free to chat, to type in that chat and have a discussion about today's forum if you like. It's definitely an important forum to be talking about with women, COVID disproportionately affecting them. So if you know anyone who's been affected by that, feel free to talk about it in the chat.
Looks good.
All right, thanks a lot.
Good. So I don't know if Andy said this to you or not, but I'll just say it to you all again. We want you to look at the cameras, and Steve and I'll be sitting here, and if you start to see me going, it means that you're not looking at the camera, that you're looking over at her. And so that means you get the
Any
side
questions you
view.
guys have, please put them in the chat so I can get them along to Jane.
Well, yes, Joe, blah, 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 and then look at the camera.
You know, I'm trying to
So then
I don't have my counterpart, so I can't bounce off of her, but I am doing the best that I can. So welcome everyone who's here. I feel like I'm talking to myself, but that's okay. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We got 5 more minutes until our presentation or until our forum. We're excited, looking forward to hearing from our panelists. Good morning, Needy. How are you? Thanks for joining us. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. I'm sorry if I did not. Hi, Bruce. Good morning. Thanks for joining us, Bruce, as always. Good morning. I am all by my lonesome today, everyone. Lainey is on vacation. So I am taking the reins today. And again, happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone. Beautiful day today. And good news is vaccines will be available March 29th for 16 and over, so I can finally get a vaccine. Yay. Oh, thanks, Beth. I appreciate that. Oh, good. I'm glad I pronounced that, Needy. Thank you.
I know, what a loser, right? Again, he's just in Cleveland.
Oh, people are slowly coming in. Good morning, everyone. 3 minutes until showtime. We're looking forward to the forum today. We're excited. And I know there are a lot of people who are looking forward to it as well. 2 minutes until showtime. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Val. Thanks for joining us. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Needy. I appreciate that. Hi, Renee. Thanks for joining us. It is a national concern. So thank you. Good morning, Leslie. Thanks for joining us today. Looking forward to today's discussion. And we got 2 more minutes until showtime.
We have 1 minute.
See, our panelists are getting ready to give us some knowledge, and we're excited about that. Hi, Maggie. Thanks for joining us. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Looking forward to today's discussion. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to send them over or put them in the chat, and I can send them to James. So thank you again. 1 minute until showtime. Thanks again for joining our pre-chat this morning, and looking forward to today's discussion. Hi, Bill.
Yeah, 30 seconds. We're going to roll the intro first, and I'll give you the countdown.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. We're live streaming from the Boathouse at Confluence Park. I'm Steve Marks, chair of the CMC Board of Trustees and president of Hannah News Service here in Columbus, and I want to thank you for tuning in today. Let's begin by welcoming new members, Andrew Pierce II of the Worth Foundation, and our newest lifetime member, Nadi Sadiani. Thank you both for joining. Conversation moves us forward, and members power our conversation. We'd like to invite you to join CMC. Membership is very affordable and a great investment in yourself professionally and in the community. Metro Club live streaming is presented by the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch and PNC. Thank you. We'd also like to thank those of you who purchased a virtual seat for today's forum. We are very grateful for your support. Largely because of you, we are able to continue live streaming. You can learn more about CMC, register for events, join or renew your membership, purchase a virtual seat, or make a donation anytime at columbusmetroclub.org. Today's forum, COVID's Impact, Worse for Women, is the Mary Lazarus Legacy Forum celebrating women in society and is sponsored by The Ohio State University. Disproportionately affecting women, our childcare system is inadequate for a society in which most parents work outside the home. Millions of women were already supporting themselves and their families on meager wages before the pandemic sent unemployment rates skyrocketing. Disruptions to daycare centers, schools, and after-school programs is a daily challenge. Then, as we go down the wage scale, consider the compounding burdens of disparities in access to reliable transportation, to health care, to fresh food, and to housing. Our world was ill-prepared to aid those with the least among us. We are here. Where are we today? Let's explore these issues with our experts. Please welcome President and CEO of the YWCA, Christie Angel. President and CEO of the Workforce Development Board of Central Ohio, Lisa Patt-McDaniel. Columbus City Council President Pro Tem and Executive Director, Ohio Women's Policy, Public Policy Network, Elizabeth Brown. And our host, journalist at the State House News Bureau, Joe Ingles. Joe, the stage is yours.
Well, thank you so much for having me at the CMC today. I'm proud to be here. So this is a huge topic. Let's go ahead and get started with it. First of all, let me ask you to kind of define the topic for me. Tell me what the problems are and the issues we've seen during COVID involving women. Go ahead, whoever wants to start first.
Am I going to go first? Well, I'm going to take a stab at defining what the problems are, Joe. There are a few, and certainly Councilmember Brown and Lisa can both add in here. So first and foremost, when we think about the problems, we think about the sectors or the industries that were initially, shut down, so to speak, when we started this pandemic more than a year ago now today. And so you think about the travel and tourism, hotel, motel industry and sectors. You think about retail establishments, restaurant establishments. Women dominate, right, some of those, those jobs in those fields, in those sectors. And so you have just there, a large group of women who lost employment. And had to figure out how they were going to make ends meet. Of course, things caught up with the recovery bills and the CARES bills with unemployment. But nevertheless, those sectors are among some of the last that are going to return, especially when you look at that travel, tourism, hotel industry, and so forth. In addition to that, to compound, how women, have been disproportionately impacted, you look at child rearing, education, educating our children. Still, in today's society, women disproportionately bear the brunt of they take care of the family. So whether that's an extended family or children in the home, women are, providing that care. And so with that, we saw, just nearly a year ago next week, daycares were shut down. And those that were allowed to stayed open with limited capacity. So if a woman was working outside of the home and was in a position to continue to work, she then had to figure out childcare, for her children. And we had all children at home because schools were closed during that time. Now schools, some came back online, some did not. But certainly, education and educating children in a virtual environment, whether you had to work or didn't have to work, that still fell largely to women, although I understand that millennial men are doing a better job, millennial partners, of kind of sharing the caregiving with their partners and spouses. And then the last thing I'll just add here is that women disproportionately were also serving on the front line. So I take my own organization. Disproportionately, we are women, we're a women-centric organization, but we also employ a large number of women. So the social workers, those that work in our family center, which is our center for homeless families, those that work in our building downtown, which is a 24/7 building, largely those are women. Frontline operations, and so they too had to figure out, how do I now come to work and still manage through a pandemic, which is trauma, which is traumatic, and take care of my family, and navigate all of these things.
Yeah, and that's really tough when you don't have the income that you really need to get things done, and you don't feel like you have the support, right?
Yes, and Joe, I think we should point out the pandemic has really just ripped the Band-Aid off of problems that we really were experiencing before the pandemic. So I know I had been in lots of conversations about increasing childcare, right? Making childcare more affordable, more accessible, covering times when families were actually working, which sometimes is after 6 o'clock or before 6 in the morning. And so the pandemic just really ripped the Band-Aid off of the things that we were starting to do, and it just made everything more apparent to those who perhaps were not paying the kind of attention we would have liked them to have paid before. And so all those issues affected women then, and so of course when the pandemic hit, it's not a big surprise to any of us that women are bearing the brunt of it. And it's all women, but it's disproportionately Black women, Latino women, women who, all of the things that Christie said, women who don't necessarily get to dictate their own schedules, certainly women who had to step out of professional careers. So it's definitely all women, but some women have disproportionately borne even more of the brunt of it.
And Liz, I know, in your situation, you've got small children, and, you've been here, you've seen this. There are the people that you can always count on to help you out with the kids. But during COVID, a lot of those people were older, and a lot of those people were not able to help out with the kids. And that's a challenge, right?
Yeah, we talk a lot about care work that women are engaged in, and sometimes it's their employment. The care work is what women are paid to do, and sometimes it's their, what they actually do off the clock, right? Caring for not just children, but parents or spouses who are really dependent on that. And COVID threatened that care relationship that women have with people who are outside of their own household. COVID also exposed the very essential nature of the care work that women are paid to do, right? So when, and I'll use myself as an example, but I really want to talk about a constituent and friend of mine, Yolanda, and her story. But I will tell you, when childcare closed and schools closed last year, at the beginning of the pandemic, I had a 1-year-old, almost 2, and I had a 4-year-old. And, suddenly that was all on my husband and me. We were able to work from home. We didn't have to make that choice between showing up or being at home. But it was really freaking hard to work from home, with that dynamic of the 2 kids. And we had this thing on our refrigerator. It looked like a football draft, drafting hours in the day. Okay, I need 1 to 2. Can you do nap? For the toddler, I'll put the 4-year-old in front of the TV because I have to do this meeting. And we had that conversation every night about the next day. But I do want to talk about Yolanda because she was a social worker. She had 2 school-aged kids. And we talked about the incredible stress she felt showing up for her job, how demanding it was, not only the hours it took for her, but the emotional demands of social work, the emotional demands of so much of the care work that women are employed to do, and that guilt she felt between trying to make sure her kids could do their schoolwork and she could show up for her job. And the story I'm telling you about Yolanda was pre-pandemic. As my co-panelists have said, the crisis revealed problems in our society, that ways we were broken or already breaking, right? And so many mothers in Yolanda's position doing these jobs that had to, they said, I can't do it. I have to be there for my kids. And that's why you see these unemployment rates disproportionately high for women. They simply couldn't do it anymore. Either they were laid off because their sectors were disproportionately impacted. There's no work from home for the hotel housekeeper, or they had to voluntarily do it because they simply couldn't make it work anymore.
Yeah, and that gets into, what are the options for women who still were in the pandemic and they're still dealing with this? What are the options out there, emergency measures and things that can be done right now to help women in those situations?
Well, right now there is some assistance, right? If someone is at home and they're unable to work, if they're able to still get unemployment, and there's additional pandemic unemployment that they can draw down. But when those run out, essentially what you have are, they're not just dropping out of employment. I mean, they're no longer reflected in the unemployment numbers. So if you look at the unemployment numbers in Columbus and Franklin County, everybody's touting that they're low. They're low because many of the women are falling out of those numbers and now are reflected in our decreasing labor participation rate, which is something entirely different. But if you have a woman who's caught up in that, we do have rental assistance programs now. I can tell you, as a board member of a food pantry in Dublin, of all places, we are seeing more and more families and coming to the food pantry to supplement their food. You have all of that going on. So the great thing about the American Rescue Plan is there are some additional, there's additional help there as far as child care credits and helping to boost child care providers, more assistance with home mortgage and rental payments, extension of unemployment benefits, assuming, again, that a woman has been able to still draw on those unemployment benefits and hasn't outrun those employment benefits. So, I think we've got to focus on what can we do to get those women while they're home to try to engage in skilling up and looking at what the plan will be after the pandemic. But again, that also assumes they have access to the internet and broadband, and that they do have some way of occupying their children while they do those things. So I don't think there are easy answers. I actually think it gets easier as a pandemic starts to ease and children are in school and we're able to have the capacity for child care. But that's what I'm seeing on the ground. I'd love to hear what my panelists colleagues are seeing.
Well, I agree with you, Lisa, on some of the solutions. I want to, before I talk about a couple of other things, I also wanted to say that Councilmember Liz Brown, started, Councilmember Brown, I just have to say your whole name all the time.
Well, it's 2 syllables.
Yeah, that's true. Started a program, I'm going to call it the wrong thing, but it's, I believe, for those who need to take off time if they need to quarantine.
Right to recover.
Right to recover, right? And it's not just for women, it's for anyone, right, who doesn't have, leave time or those kinds of things. Right to Recover provides some resources, and there are several community-based organizations that are helping individuals access those funds, and we want to make sure that people, truly know that is a resource out there, especially if someone needs to quarantine, or is ill without pay. In addition to that, Joe, we are starting. So we run 3 lines of business, and one of our lines of business is child development and child care. So we have been intentionally getting ready for summer camp because we know parents will want summer camp for their children, but they also feel that their children need summer camp. They need the socialization, they need the healthy play, they need to be outside, and we're going to add educational enrichment to those summer camp opportunities, and we also are going to make sure that we can operate and offer scholarship opportunities, because we realize that some women may look at that and say, this price point I cannot afford, and we want to make sure that we have, we take into account affordability. Now this is in the Gahanna, in the Westerville communities where we operate, but the YMCA is thinking of the same thing. I've spoken with their leaders there, and they all believe we need to, because school will be out soon. And so we need to, as the pandemic, we start to ease up from the pandemic and people are being vaccinated and thinking about going back to work or looking for work or working, to increase and improve skills and that kind of thing, that there are options for families for their children during this time. And then, then we move into school and we'll have, before and after school opportunities and those kinds of things. The last thing I also want to remind people about this pandemic in particular, and this is something that Eric Kerouac and I talk about from Action for Children, we lost about 16% of the child care programs in this community as of early this year. And so as demand increases, supply may be down. And we also have to remember that many of those programs are small businesses operated by women. Many of those programs are small businesses operated by minority women, largely African American women. Now, not all of them, but many of them. And Eric, will have a report that will come out next week, and he will talk a little bit more about the supply of childcare slots that's going to be available and what we can do about that, and look at some of these numbers as well.
Yeah, I want to add to what to this idea of what families need, and Christie mentioned the Right to Recover program, which if you are someone or someone who has gotten a positive diagnosis for COVID and needs to self-quarantine, or you're caring for someone who has a positive COVID diagnosis and therefore you need to quarantine and you're under 150% of the federal poverty line, please call the Columbus Urban League. Our program offers emergency financial assistance to get you through that period. So I want to make sure that I'm giving people those tools to share as well as use yourself if you need. And really that program is based on this idea that in trying to figure out what families need, we so often want to create a program. How do we create the perfect program, that will plug into what families need? And I think it has to do with the American psyche that we can't quite wrap our heads around the fact what families need is money. Right? Families need cash to be able to buy food, to be able to pay rent. And I'll use an example of a new study out of Cal State about diapers. And the researchers talked to women, and they asked actually for parents, but only 3 men volunteered for the study, and they had like hundreds of women, because women are the ones keeping track of how many diapers are needed in their family. So they talked to women, which says a lot, about who are diaper insecure, essentially, who said, this is the #1 stress in my life, diapers for my kids. More than food, more than rent, more than utilities. Diapers are not covered under WIC, right? A good program that helps low-income families. Diapers are not covered under SNAP, a good program that helps low-income families. You need money in order to buy diapers. And when you don't have money, you ration. And when you have to ration diapers, your child ends up with a urinary tract infection or with severe diaper rash that can lead to infection. And these are very real problems that I think if we bring to the table solutions that help give families just resources, money, we will start to see alleviated. The National Diaper Bank said that there was an 86% spike in diaper distribution to families during the pandemic because so many more families are suffering. And Lisa mentioned, or Christie, I forget, ARP, the American Rescue Package. It is revolutionary what has been done in that package to provide money to families who need it. The child tax credit has the opportunity to be for children what Social Security is for seniors, something that is critical and often life-saving, and I hope one day is so normal and commonplace that we take it for granted. The child tax credit is going to cut poverty by 40%, child poverty. It's going to cut child poverty for Black families by half. So I just think that sometimes we just need to get back to the basics about what families need all the time, and especially in the pandemic.
You know, I so agree with the notion that there is no perfect program. We don't need to create a super program. We need to make smart investments in the things that we already know work. There are so many of us, and I say us, you know, community-based organizations and others, you know, NGOs and the like, that we've been running, you know, all types of programs. Lisa mentioned rent assistance. We've talked about rental assistance in this community and the need for rent assistance in this community for many, many years. The Affordable Housing Alliance has, you know, focused on it. Not-for-profit housing organizations have focused on it. And yet, we could never kind of get the investment that we needed, right? We couldn't quite overcome the, well, how long will they need this? Well, how is it going to be managed? You know, right, trying to go to what I call all the red tape, right? And instead of the red tape, we need green tape. We need green tape programs. We need to just make the investments in the programs that we already know that work with the organizations that are already doing the work. And when you make those investments in the organization, don't forget that it takes people to run these things as well. Like we need to be smart about this. This pandemic has taught us, you know, here are the people that will come together with the programming, the staff and the like, and do the things that we need to do to get people through, you know, one of the most traumatic times of their lives, and one of the most traumatic for me. And so, you know, let's make smart investments in those things that already work when we have the resources now, and we've proved all the points. We have the data, right? So let's just do what we know works, and some of those things that we've been talking about for a long time. And I also think we have to think about equity. And when we talk about equity, you know, there are some things that, you know, for a Black family, Black and brown families, we know, you know, the need for diapers, the need for rental assistance, the need for affordable housing, you know, is exponentially more, just given where they fall on the poverty line in this community. So let's do the things that we need to do to start, you know, dealing with the poverty and so forth, you know, in this community, so that, you know, God forbid we ever have to deal with something like this again. I hope I don't have to see another pandemic. You know, then we will know we won't be in the situation that we are in today, and I include digital equity, you know, as a part of that as well.
And I just want to, you know, Liz, what you said, people need cash. And Christie, people need a home. And what we don't do is trust people to know what they need. Because I bet there's people who hear that and say, really what people need is cash. And that is so true. And that in my line of work, which is helping people find jobs that pay a living wage, that gives them the cash to pay for these things, you know, they're probably like, well, we just give people cash, what are they going to do with it? Well, you know what? I think people know what they need. And, you know, when I hear her say diapers, and I remember personally a night where I was home with my children by myself, one was too little, and I couldn't actually run to the store to get diapers, and I'm privileged, okay? I'd have my neighbor come over crying, stay with my children so I could run out. I can't imagine what it's like not to be able to have the cash to buy diapers for my children. So things that we're not even considering up here, we've got to trust people to know what they need. And we got to trust women to know what they need. And we have the opportunity, I think, I know, I don't just think, I know, to stop talking about how we solve these problems and actually do it. And I think that this pandemic, more than any other time in my career, gives us the opportunity to get up, stop talking about it, and do it. And we've got some of the resources to do it that will be coming into this community, and to invest in the things we know that work.
You know, you're talking about the resources that we have during COVID, trying to get women back on their feet, but eventually we are going to get out of COVID. and we're going to be in a better place, except that some of these things that we're talking about will probably go away. And the underlying problem of not getting enough money to pay the bills, not having enough support, those things stay. So how do you deal with this long term so that women have what they need on a long-term basis to take care of their families?
Yeah.
Well, we all have some ideas.
Surprise.
Surprise. Some of the things we've been talking about for a while, including, how do we keep women from falling, anyone, but how do you keep people from falling off the benefits cliff, right? Why don't we create a benefit slide, or glide instead of a cliff? We've been talking about it for a very long time. And the benefits cliff, essentially, works this way. If I am on, any type of, public assistance, whether it may be childcare, food assistance, perhaps, my health care, and I get to a point where I'm making $15 or $16 an hour, somewhere in that area, which is, what is that, $31,000, $32,000 a year, and it depends on family size, of course. But as my income rises, I lose all those benefits. So now, and I have a friend who is going through this right now. She was in a housing program that allowed her to finish her degree after, experiencing some pretty tragic things in her life. She had one child. She got a job in a corporate America, and she was making $16 or $17 an hour. She lost her housing right away. She found housing for $8 or $9.50 a month for her and her daughter. Now she's expected to pay full freight childcare, which is about $1,200 a month. And she is expected, of course, she has to have a car to drive to work. You have to have a car, you have to have gas, you have to have insurance. So there's another $300-400 or so coming out of her pocket. She now is responsible for her health insurance, which from her company, but that's a monthly amount that comes out of her check. And it's $49,000. I think she makes about $49,000 a year right now. And to one's mind, that sounds like a lot of money. But when you have to take care of a child, you have to pay for child care, transportation, and in all food, because she lost her food benefits as well. So now all of those things are gone, and they were gone within 60 days. And so she has no ability to ramp up, right? Because as the money's coming in, the money's going out the door. So she keeps saying, I can't save. I'm not even able to save. And she's not able to plan for an emergency. And so, we know, again, this is something we know about. So we need to put resources towards, and resources, it's not just money. Of course, it's money, but it's also policy change. We need to create a benefits glide, as I like to say, for people coming off of those benefits so that they can, build up their financial, they won't have a lot of money, but they can get accustomed to having to pay for all of those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's so right. And I also think, like, the short answer to the question of what about when these things go away is we kind of have to fight like hell for them not to go away. Mm-hmm. And the child tax credit, I'll use that as my example again from ARP. Which is such a funny term to say, ARP. Sounds like I'm a dog. But, that was passed for a year and to kind of help people through the pandemic. But again, this program has the potential to protect kids. Frankly, it is saying, as Americans, as the American government, we give a damn about resources kids get. We, are scandalized by our own child poverty rates. We affirm that that shouldn't be our future. And, folks in Washington are going to be taking up these questions that, the American Rescue Package has put before us the opportunity to invest in people. And they're going to be taking up these questions about whether that continues. And so I do think it's up to all of us to ensure that these things can continue. And then myself, I'm a lawmaker at the local level, and things work very differently in cities and towns and counties than they do in Washington, for sure. But there are opportunities that I can relentlessly pursue to try to have that safety net for women. I want to cite a friend of ours, Amy Claiborne, started Move to Prosper, and she sent me a note before this panel because she wanted to make sure I saw something that I thought it was really important to lift up, which is in her report. And Move to Prosper is a far-reaching program about housing and financial security, and you've probably talked about it here, actually. But her report highlighted that the availability of coaching for women, specifically around financial empowerment, impacted the ability of the mothers in her program to weather the pandemic. And we are doubling down as a city on financial empowerment resources. So that's one stone I can overturn on the local level to help make sure we continue to stand up our Financial Navigator program, which tries to provide these resources to women. So I'll just add that, as Christie said, we know these problems exist. The answers aren't always easy, but we've got to get creative, all of us as everyday citizens and those of us who can use sharp elbows and wield the power that we have.
Yeah, well, and I agree with all that. But I also think the shorter term answer here, too, is that we have a 2-year window of a lot of money coming into this area, and everything that's sitting in the American Rescue Plan to take a look at what we can do in the next 2 years with this money and be radical and bold and invest in those things we know work, and look at what kind of cash assistance can we give to people to solve their problems that allow them to have a base in a home, to have their bills paid, so that if they need to, they can get reskilled, to get jobs that for the long term will pay them enough money to sustain their families, because that will, first of all, lift them up, lifted their families up, lifted their children up who have just gone through an incredibly bad time of getting a good education, and I just think that in these next 2 years that we should do everything we can to make use of these resources with the hope that some of these things that we know can work will continue on. But I don't want to bank on it. I don't want to bank on it.
Yep.
I think we need to be radical and bold.
Absolutely.
Well, we'll move to questions from our live stream audience in just a few minutes here. But let's follow up on that. You were talking about helping and making sure the aid stays there, but there's also this question of, is there enough there to begin with? We saw where the minimum wage increase ran into problems. That wasn't something that got through Congress as of yet. We're seeing that when we have discussions about taxes and that sort of thing, the winners and the losers don't necessarily line up with what you're talking about right here. So where do you go from here?
Yeah, I think that's such an excellent point, that average CEO to worker pay. I'm sorry, my mask is caught on my earring, as I said it would be. The CEO to worker ratio of their pay, 60 years ago it was 35-1, and now it's 250-1. Lisa probably can correct me. It might be more like 350-1 average, right? So to say that we can't afford an increase in the minimum wage, I'll tell you where I am on that. We absolutely have to raise the wage because people need to be able to pay for their basic necessities. And that seems like a no-brainer to me, and I'm not really sure why it's so hard for people to wrap their minds around when you think about how much more productivity there is in this economy and how workers have not actually been able to be paid their share of that productivity. So there are a lot of fights, and the package, ARP, or the American Rescue Plan, in addition to some of these, Right to Recover, our local program, was funded by federal dollars that came to localities. And so these things are funded by these one-time monies, and it's not sustainable, to Lisa's point and to Joe's point. So it's not just a matter of cloning the current solutions. It's doing things that are radical to stabilize and advance families, and then really reimagining that policy landscape.
And let me just tell you why this is so important. Okay, so, we can say we're just talking about women, but for all the companies that are out there, we're also talking about you. If you know, the 2050 study shows we are not going to have enough people for all the jobs we're bringing into this Central Ohio economy. And right now, our Central Ohio economy is the GDP driver for the state of Ohio. And the state of Ohio is not growing greatly in population. And that means that if you want your company to succeed, everybody who can work and wants to work needs to work. And so that means you need these women to come back into the job market, trained, skilled, supported in how they work. And so if you want that, you need to be in favor of the things we're talking about today, because your company will not survive for the long haul. And our economic development group, will not be able to continue to attract people to our region because we do not have the workforce eventually. And that, from a business perspective, is why everything we are saying here, you should be taking notes. And we need more family-friendly policies by companies and employers, because for exactly what I've been saying. We need to support women in work, because you need every one of those women who want to work and make a living to be able to do it. So.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I just, really quickly, I promise I will be quick because I know we're getting to questions, to put some numbers on what Lisa said so perfectly. Center for American Progress looked at just mothers who left the workforce or had to reduce hours to assume caretaking responsibilities, and found that the impact of that amounted to $64.5 billion per year in lost wages and economic activity. So exactly what Lisa is saying. And when we talk about solutions, I'm always quick to jump to policy, and I know that my co-panelists are too. And one thing that the three of us actually have talked about is that it isn't just government policy. There are things you can do as an employer, there are things we can do as governments, and there are things we can do in our own homes. There really are, to help support women. The New York Times had this great headline: "This isn't burnout, it's betrayal," right? We have sort of betrayed women for all of time in terms of supporting their success.
Okay. Well, it's the CMC's tradition to take audience questions, and Jane Scott of the CMC is curating questions from our live stream audience. Jane, what's the first question you have back there today?
Well, there's quite a few questions that have come in online. Some of the things you've already spoken about, but we might want to just underline a couple things here. Richard Needles, what impact will the new child tax credits have on working families? I know you've talked about reducing poverty. Are there other elements to that besides just reducing poverty?
Do you want me to? Yeah. So specifically, the child tax credit it has been increased and made refundable, which is really the key piece. So before, the tax credit that you got as a parent with dependent children, you had to claim on your taxes, and it wasn't refundable. So if you didn't make enough to file income taxes, which means you were, really at the low end of the income spectrum, you basically couldn't realize the tax credit. It is now refundable. So families will get, and there is actually a glide on this. The key, I always pick up a few nuggets from Christie Angel. I like green tape program, that's a good one, and the glide. There is a glide on the child tax credit. So single heads of household at $75K and dual heads of household making $150K YWCA will get the child tax credit in full, and it's refundable, so no matter what you make, you can get that amount up to $3,600 a year for children under 5. I think it's $3,000 a year for children over 5, up to 13 years of age, I believe. And then from there, it phases out. So this is going to help families at the lowest end reduce poverty, right? And let's trust families to spend their money on the things that they need, because they will do it. And then, you know, as you get up the income scale, this has an economic stimulus effect as well. So maybe you make enough to afford the very basic necessities, but you don't make enough to fully participate in our economy, which doesn't only harm you and your family, but really harms all of us. So I'm really thinking globally about the impact that the child tax credit will have, how it's really stimulative.
So this question, what's the role of education / skills training / on-the-job training that leads to better jobs and higher paying jobs? And you touched on this a little bit, but are we doing enough to get the right people, the right kind of education to help them get a better job so they can afford affordable housing?
So do you really expect me to say we are?
That was a softball lead-in question. What should we be doing?
So there's a couple of things, both locally. We have money to help people pay for education and training. Our Ohio Means Job Center over on Broad Street, and we are serving people virtually now. We partner with the Columbus Libraries, and we'll be doing that more as we open back up so people can access us. In giving people, exposing them to the career opportunities here in Central Ohio, and helping them to determine what kind of training and credentials are right for them to help them get the job they want, and then we actually have assistance. But at a national level, one of the policies we're strongly pushing for is the expansion of Pell Grants. Right now, you can use Pell Grants to help you get college degrees, but we'd like to see them expanded so that if there's other credentials, I think now you can use them towards apprenticeship actually, but other kinds of credentials that don't necessarily result in a college degree, but are credentials that get you jobs. We spend as much money as we possibly can on training. Right now we have over 200 people engaged in training, but 200 people in Central Ohio, that's not enough. So additional assistance in providing training and not just college degrees, other kinds of training as well, is desperately what we need. We need shorter term credentials that can stack in case somebody does want to get a degree down the road. Making sure that credentials are easily attained by people in a short period of time. I talked about people's ability to step away from what they're doing to get a credential that would get them a much better job. Who's going to pay their bills? Who's going to buy their diapers? Who's going to buy everything else they need? So yes, there's more we need to do to help people do that. We're trying to leverage every possible, source of funding to help people do that, but there is room for a lot more here in Central Ohio.
This keeps moving, so sorry. Chris Cloth, what is known about how much of the recovery funds will come to Columbus, and what are some of the concrete strategies that will be funded to address the needs you all have raised?
So Lisa, we'll tag team this, I think, and Liz as well. I think we believe right now that there's about $540 million coming into the Central Ohio region. That's Columbus, Franklin County, and our surrounding suburban communities. I believe that's the latest number. That does not include money that would be going to school districts. They have kind of their own line item, I believe. And I'm not sure if there are transit organizations and other organizations that have, line items or not.
Yeah, there are some, and the programs we've talked about too, right? The child tax credit
Right.
and those kinds of things. So
Yeah.
substantial amounts.
Substantial. And then Mayor Ginther Commissioner John O'Grady and Council President Shannon Hardin had the foresight at the end of last year to put together a Recovery and Resiliency Committee. I'm chairing that committee along with 36 or so other citizens and partners, and we are looking at making recommendations. We will be making recommendations later, very early summer, to the county and the city regarding investment strategies. And I use the word investment, but programs that should be supported, some of the things that we've talked about today, some of the big ideas that we really need to be lifting up and looking at, so that we come out of this recovery in a resilient and equitable way. And so that work, we're at phase 2 of that work. Phase 1 of that work was really about a learning journey and looking at very specific sectors. So we're not looking at all things, as you might imagine. We're looking at very specific sectors and parts of and industries, I will say. And if you go to the City of Columbus's website, columbus.gov, and go to the Department of Development, you can find a link to the recovery and resiliency work. You can see every one of our sessions that they all started last fall and concluded early this month. And then we will start the phase 2 work at the end of March, and those will all be televised on the Columbus, what is it called, CTV, as well as they will be online. I sound like a commercial today for like all of my partners. As you can imagine, we're all working closely together, and there's a lot of work being done in a collaborative way, which is a good thing about this community. And so, yes, that recovery and resiliency work, you can find it on the city's website and wait for and watch, listen, I would say, for our recommendations soon.
And can I just, really quickly, I just want to say, all the burdens shouldn't fall on Franklin County and the city of Columbus. And I would urge the suburbs to consider the amount of money they're getting, and every suburb has people who could benefit from the things we're talking about. And I would ask you to consider that some of that money, you consider investing in some of these things together, because we always look to Franklin County and the city of Columbus, but people live everywhere in the county.
One great example of something that we can do together, we talk about digital equity, and expansion of broadband and the kinds of broadband solutions that are a price point for all to afford. This is something that we can do as a region, and we can band together, not just Franklin County but in the city of Columbus, but we can bring in our suburban partners and really work together to find a solution to some of the gaps that have been uncovered during this pandemic.
And MORPC has started some of that, with local jurisdictions' help. City of Columbus invested in devices and internet access, kind of to get us through this really hard period that students needed that help quickly. But again, the digital equity was a problem before the flashing neon sign of COVID-19 made it that much more real. And so they're thinking in the long term, and I've really appreciated the work MORPC's done on that front.
Great. Needy Santiani, our new lifetime member, you mentioned there are things we can do in our homes. Please give us your top 3 to 5 suggestions.
Sure. So there's this really great, I was talking to these ladies about this yesterday, but there's a really great piece in the New York Times, if you haven't read it. It's called The Primal Scream, and it is a series that the New York Times did about the effect of COVID-19 on working mothers. They actually had a Primal Scream line that was open. It was a number you could call and scream into it, and they advertised this, and I'm a working mother, so I was getting like the advertisements in my feeds and stuff to call the Primal Scream number, which I almost did multiple times, but then because you're so busy, you're like, oh, I mean to do that, and then you never get around to your Primal Scream. Anyway, long wind up to the fact that they really highlighted some of the key components that drive inequities for women, and specifically working mothers. In homes, I will tell you, the balance of the mental load between working parents, so both partners or spouses being clear about what they take on an everyday basis is really important. And then being explicit about how to divide that load. There are tasks that you see that are done, like the dishes. If they're not done, everybody's very aware of it because the sink's a mess. There are other tasks like the health care of your children. In my own household, we have had a stomach bug going around for the last week. And I do all of that health care between, working with the doctor, making sure we've got medicine, doing all of those things. And some of that work is this unseen labor. And so one of the biggest pieces of advice to anyone who's watching and thinking about trying to equalize your own household, make a list with your partner of all the things you do. And that's hard. I actually know that that's really hard to do. I don't offer that lightly. But I do think it's important so that you fully see each other and understand what goes on. And I also think if you're able to be your own advocate in your workplace and talk to your partner about being an advocate in their workplace, it is more acceptable. We just have to be real about this. We all are more accepting of a woman bouncing a baby on her knee or a child interrupting her Zoom call than we are when a man does it. And we've got to shift that paradigm. That stereotype we have in our heads is the reason that men don't take paternity leave even when it's accessible to them. Mm-hmm. Isn't that depressing? Mm-hmm. It's true. Men don't do it even when it's acceptable because there's some kind of social stigma. So those are some of the things that I would offer you. Make sure that both partners are taking the leave available to them. Make sure you understand the load that each of you is taking on and be explicit about it.
This question's from Karen Warapa from the United Way of Central Ohio. Maybe some of you know her. It's a long question. I'm going to get to the gist of it. Is there a realistic place for unions targeting female employees or essential workers? And what can your organizations do to maybe study or facilitate this?
I can say quickly, I like the question and I want to tell you one reason why. We talk a lot about the gender pay gap. And that hovers, between 75 and 80 cents on the dollar overall. It's 64 cents on the dollar for Black women and 59 cents for Latinas. I believe those are the current numbers against the white male dollar. We talk about that a lot. You look at union members, the gender pay gap is 98%, or 98 cents, to the $1. Unions and the act of collective bargaining matters for a reason because it does bring equity and it does level the playing field. So I really like the question. And that was not an answer. So I don't know if either one of you has something you want to add to that, but I think it's really important that we expand access to collective bargaining.
Well, I think that it's important for us to be looking at, work with our labor partners, to try and recruit women into their programs. I mean, they have, programs right now that they're running with, I believe it's the Columbus Urban League and maybe Impact, their trade programs where people are learning to, become skilled apprentices in the trades and the like. And so they have to be intentional about recruiting women into those roles and into those opportunities. And so that's a conversation, and those are relationships, right? Relationships with those leaders, bringing women into those natural forums where they can learn more about those programs and setting goals. I believe in setting goals. That which does not get measured does not get done. And so setting goals that they will increase, the women's participation in some of those programs. Many of those are supported by some of our government partners and other partners as workforce programs. Lisa, you may support some of those. Yep. So why not have, an accountability measure that's put there to include more women in that work?
I mean, and the thing that I completely agree is when you have collective bargaining, I worked at the state for many years, and when I was in a position that was covered by the union, I never had to worry that the 5 guys in my 8-person group were being paid more than me for any other reason that, they were doing the job a little bit longer, if that was the case. And so I do think that collective bargaining is important because it usually automatically means that those wage gaps and benefit gaps, there's transparency about what people can be paid and for what kind of work, and I think that they're very important. So even though we don't, as the Workforce Board, except for in the trades, really have a lot of involvement otherwise, you know, I do feel that collective bargaining is an important tool.
A good general question from Bill Lafayette to close the questions. What is the single greatest insight that you have gained through your work over the past year? Why are you looking at me first? So, I don't know. So the single, I think I've expressed my single biggest insight. I mean, I have my own personal insights, which is I'm never going to go back to that normal because it wasn't good. But in the same way, we talked about these things before. The Band-Aid is ripped off. All these problems have been exacerbated by the pandemic. And we would be fools to turn away and act like they aren't really as bad as they are, because they are. And so the most important thing I learned is that you can't just sit around and talk. I love my colleagues. I love every meeting I sit in with Christie and Liz, for that matter. But we've got to get our colleagues to, and not just our colleagues, because it's not just on the government and the nonprofit sector, all of us, to actually do something about it and not let this moment pass. That's what I've learned.
Well, that was a good one. I've learned that too. You know, I think the single greatest insight is the gap, the racial gap, right? And how wide it is and apparent that it is. And to Lisa's point, we can no longer just talk about it or, you know, feel it, so to speak. We have to do something about it.
I will say for me, on the personal side, my biggest realization is that I love having breakfast with my kids. We were always so rushed before that we never did that, and we do it every day now. It was always only a weekend thing. So there are those little silver linings. But more globally, really the realization for me, if we're talking about gender issues, I read an economist said, you know, the pandemic took a crowbar to the gender wage gap and pried it open. And when you look at the numbers so far, it's actually what they're starting to see is kind of an artificial narrowing of the wage gap, because so many lower paid jobs, which women held, are no longer being counted. They're gone. And so one of the things that I really, actually, this is not just a gender issue, this is global. Like, interrogate the data. That's something that I've really been taught in this pandemic, because all of these challenges we're talking about can look different on a piece of paper than they do, you know, to my friend Yolanda who's feeling it, experiencing it, or to any one of the people we're providing cash assistance to in the Right to Recover program. You know, we really have to interrogate the data, or we're never going to be bold, solve the problems like Lisa is saying, and fundamentally reshape our approach to racial equity, like Christie is saying.
Excellent. What a great forum. It's what we do so well here at CMC is we bring great panelists, great moderators together, and we talk about important issues. Our forum next week will explore the complex issues of cost, access, and policy involved with solving the affordable housing puzzle, which was raised today. Let's recognize the Mary Lazarus Legacy Forum celebrating women in society and thank today's sponsor, The Ohio State University. Thanks also to the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation for presenting our live stream in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch and PNC. And thanks again to our online virtual seat patrons. And special appreciation to our speakers. We could not do this without you, Christie Angel, Lisa Patt-McDaniel, and Councilwoman Brown, Liz Brown, and of course, Joe Ingles. What a great job you did today. We hope you'll tune in again next week. Until then, be well and stay safe.